It had been a rare, peaceful Saturday afternoon, the kind of day where the neighborhood seemed to breathe a little easier. Lawns were freshly cut, the air carried the scent of summer barbecues, and children's laughter echoed faintly between houses. My daughter Emily was out on the sidewalk in front of our home, her favorite pink chalk clutched tightly in her hand. Emily was 7 years old and had lived her whole life with cerebral palsy. Walking was hard for her, running impossible, but that never stopped her from finding joy in the little things. Sidewalk chalk was her favorite pastime. She would draw bright flowers, suns with smiley faces, and her signature, hearts with uneven lines, scrawled in bright yellow chalk. It wasn't just play to her, it was how she told the world she was here. I had just stepped back inside the house to refill her water bottle, keeping an ear tuned to the faint scratch of chalk outside. The sun was warm, and I remember pausing for just a moment to take in how normal, how safe everything felt. That pause is something I will regret for the rest of my life. It was then that I heard the sound. A sudden roar of an engine, too fast, too reckless for a suburban street where children played. Tires screeched, the noise jarring and unnatural in the quiet afternoon, and then a thud, a sickening, hollow thud that I will never ever forget. I dropped the bottle instantly and sprinted outside, my heart already pounding with dread. The scene in front of me blurred for a second, my mind refusing to accept what my eyes were seeing. My little girl lay sprawled on the asphalt, her chalk scattered in fragments across the pavement. The sun she had been halfway through drawing was smeared beneath the black tread marks of a car tire. And there, sitting behind the wheel of a shiny black SUV, was the woman who had caused it all. Her name was Karen. She wasn't a stranger. In fact, she was our neighbor, living 2 houses down the street. Everyone knew her, mostly for the wrong reasons. She was the type who constantly complained about everything. Children being too loud, people parking too close to her driveway, even harmless decorations like holiday lights. She was always the center of drama, always convinced she was the victim in some imagined feud. And now she had run over my disabled daughter. Karen stepped out of the SUV, her sunglasses perched on her head, phone in one hand, latte in the other. Her face twisted into a scowl, not of concern or guilt, but of irritation, as if Emily had been the one to inconvenience her. I fell to the ground beside my daughter, my hands trembling as I checked her small body for injuries. She was conscious, thank God, but tears streamed down her face as she whimpered in pain. Her legs, already fragile from her condition, looked twisted at unnatural angles. My vision blurred with tears of my own, but even through the haze I caught Karen's words. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't asking if Emily was okay. No, she was yelling about how Emily shouldn't have been on the sidewalk, yelling about how she had places to be, yelling about how it wasn't her fault if kids get in the way. Every word cut deeper than the last. She didn't care. Not one bit. The neighbors began to gather, drawn by the commotion. Some rushed to call an ambulance. Others tried to comfort me as I cradled Emily, whispering to her that help was on the way. But Karen just stood there, arms crossed, tapping her foot impatiently as if she were the one suffering. When the ambulance finally arrived, the paramedics took Emily gently from my arms and loaded her into the back of the vehicle. I climbed in beside her, never once taking my eyes off her face. As the doors closed, I looked out at the crowd one last time. Karen was already back in her car, muttering under her breath, as if the entire incident had been nothing more than an inconvenience. That was the moment something inside me changed. This wasn't just an accident. This was a negligence. This was cruelty. This was the act of someone who believed rules, empathy, and accountability didn't apply to her. And as I sat in the back of that ambulance, holding my daughter's hand while sirens wailed around us, one thought burned hotter than all the rest. Karen was not going to get away with this. Not this time. And that, though I didn't realize it yet, was only the beginning of a battle that would turn our entire neighborhood upside down. For days after the accident, I felt like I was living in two worlds. Inside the hospital, everything revolved around Emily. Physical therapy, X-rays, medications, sleepless nights in a chair by her bedside. The doctors warned me it would be a long, painful recovery, and my little girl faced it all with quiet bravery that broke my heart and filled me with pride. But outside the hospital walls, another battle was brewing, and it was one I could no longer ignore. Karen had wasted no time. By the end of the week, she had already told her version of the story to everyone in the neighborhood Facebook group. She painted herself as a victim, a careful driver who had been shaken to her core when an unattended child rolled into the road. She claimed she had offered help but had been screamed at by me in a public tantrum. According to her, she was now being bullied and defamed by jealous neighbors. The comments beneath her post were split. Some people, mostly those who didn't know her well, offered sympathy. Others, especially those who had seen her reckless driving firsthand, weren't so forgiving. Still, it was clear Karen was working overtime to protect her image. That's when I decided it was time to release the video. I didn't post it online immediately. Instead, I started small. I showed it to a few trusted neighbors who had already been suspicious of Karen's story. Their reactions said it all: wide eyes, gasps, followed by anger. Word spread quickly, and soon people were coming to me quietly, asking if they could see the footage themselves. Each person who watched it became another ally. Each person who saw the truth stopped giving Karen the benefit of the doubt. But of course, Karen found out. She always did. She showed up at my house one evening, pounding on the door with a fury that rattled the glass panes. When I opened it, she stood there, red-faced, shouting about harassment and threatening to call the police for spreading lies. She didn't know that two of my neighbors were standing on their porches at that very moment, phones recording. I didn't rise to her bait. I simply told her the truth, that I had proof, and that if she wanted to involve the police, I would be more than happy to show them the footage. For once, Karen had no snappy comeback. She froze, her eyes darting nervously before she spun on her heel and stormed back to her SUV. That was the first crack in her armor. The second came a few days later at the HOA meeting. Karen had always been loud and opinionated at those gatherings, often using them as her personal stage to complain about petty grievances. But this time, when she tried to bring up how she was being targeted, several neighbors stood up and demanded she address the video. The room grew tense. Karen's voice wavered as she insisted the video was edited and taken out of context. But no one believed her anymore. For the first time, her words weren't working. For the first time, she was on the defensive. It was almost surreal to watch. The woman who had dominated our neighborhood with fear and manipulation was suddenly shrinking under the weight of truth. But Karen wasn't done. Not yet. A week later, just when I thought things might calm down, I woke up to find my car keyed from bumper to bumper. Deep, jagged lines scarred the paint. At first, I wanted to believe it was a coincidence. Maybe vandalism from teenagers. But then I found the note tucked under my windshield wiper. Accidents happen. Keep pushing, and more will follow, no signature. But again, the message was clear. I took it straight to the police. With the video, the note, and multiple witnesses willing to speak up, they finally began to take the case seriously. Karen wasn't just a bad neighbor anymore. She was a danger. Still, the damage was done. Every time I left the house, I felt her eyes on me. Every time I pulled into the driveway, I half expected her to leap out with another tirade. Emily, still recovering at home now, grew anxious whenever she saw Karen's SUV pass by the house. The sidewalk that had once been her place of joy had become a place of fear. That's when I made a decision. If Karen thought intimidation would silence me, she was wrong. If she thought the neighborhood would turn a blind eye, she was wrong. And if she thought she could hurt my child and walk away without consequences, she was dead wrong. I was going to fight this battle not just for Emily, but for every person Karen had bullied, manipulated, and harmed over the years. The truth was on my side. The neighborhood was slowly rallying behind me, and soon the law would too. But Karen wasn't finished playing her game, and her next move would be her most desperate and most dangerous yet. The weeks following the accident were a blur of stress and exhaustion. Between Emily's slow recovery, countless doctor appointments, and dealing with insurance battles, I barely had time to breathe. But in the background, Karen continued to loom like a shadow, poisoning every moment of peace we tried to salvage. At first, it was petty harassment, trash left deliberately scattered across our lawn, loud music blasting from her SUV parked right outside our house late at night, Packages delivered to our porch mysteriously disappearing, only to reappear days later, torn open and discarded on her curb. None of it could be directly proven, but everyone knew who was behind it. But then, Karen escalated. One evening, as I tucked Emily into bed, I noticed a strange flicker of light outside the window. Stepping out onto the porch, I was horrified to see a small pile of garbage smoldering at the edge of our driveway. Someone, no doubt Karen, had set it alight. Luckily, it hadn't spread far, but the message was unmistakable. I called the police immediately. They came, documented the incident, and promised to increase patrols in the area. But I could see it in their eyes, the hesitancy, the exhaustion. To them, it was just another neighborhood dispute. To me, it was terrorism. The next morning, a new post appeared in the neighborhood Facebook group, written by Karen, dripping with fake concern. Some people can't handle their personal problems without creating drama for everyone else. I shouldn't have to live in fear of being slandered every day. Please respect people's privacy instead of starting witch hunts. The audacity left me speechless. She had turned her campaign of harassment into another opportunity to play the victim. But this time, fewer people bought into it. Comments trickled in, some sympathetic but many skeptical. Maybe if you drove more carefully, one person wrote. Another added, "We've all seen the video, Karen. Stop embarrassing yourself." For the first time, the tide was turning publicly. Still, Karen wasn't one to back down. When manipulation failed, she turned to intimidation. One night, as I returned from the grocery store, I noticed Karen's SUV tailing me. She didn't bother hiding it, her headlights glaring in my rearview mirror as she followed me down every turn, right up until I pulled into my driveway. She stopped at the curb, revved her engine loudly, and sat there for several minutes before speeding off. I filed yet another report with the police, this time handing over the footage from my dash cam. Slowly, piece by piece, the evidence was piling up. But Karen still believed she was untouchable. Her boldest move came a week later at a community gathering in the park. Families were out enjoying the weekend, kids running around, neighbors chatting. Emily, though still in her wheelchair, wanted so badly to join in. I wheeled her over to the chalk-covered sidewalk, letting her add a few shaky drawings beside the other children. For a moment, it felt normal again. And then Karen arrived. She marched across the park in oversized sunglasses and her ever-present latte, her voice rising above the chatter as she spotted us. She made a show of pointing at Emily, loudly declaring that reckless parenting had caused her months of trauma and that she was considering legal action against us for defamation. The crowd froze. Parents pulled their kids closer, eyes darting between us. Karen's voice carried like poison, each word carefully chosen to twist reality. But this time she went too far. Emily, clutching her chalk, burst into tears at the sound of Karen's accusations. And as I comforted her, several neighbors stepped forward. One mother, usually quiet and reserved, snapped back at Karen, reminding her that a child had been hurt and that no amount of lies would change that. Another man pulled out his phone and began live streaming the confrontation. Within minutes, dozens of people were watching online. Karen hadn't expected resistance. She faltered, stammering as the crowd pushed back. For once, the spotlight she craved so desperately was not working in her favor. She stormed off, muttering threats under her breath. But I knew it wasn't over. Later that night, I received an email from an unfamiliar account. Attached were blurry photos of my house taken at odd hours, through windows, from the street, even from the backyard. The subject line read, "You should have stayed quiet." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just neighborhood drama anymore. Karen was crossing lines that were dangerous, criminal, and I knew I had to act fast before she did something irreversible. The police had shrugged at vandalism and noise complaints, but stalking, arson attempts, and now threatening emails? They couldn't ignore that. I gathered everything, the footage, the notes, the recordings, the photos, and took it straight to the station. This time, the officer's expression shifted as he flipped through the growing file. The case against Karen was becoming undeniable. But just as I began to believe justice was within reach, Karen made her most shocking move yet. She filed a restraining order against me. Her claim? That I was harassing her, spreading lies, and inciting the neighborhood to bully her. And because she filed first, the court scheduled an immediate hearing. Suddenly, I wasn't just defending Emily. I was fighting to clear my own name. Karen had turned the tables, or at least she thought she had. What she didn't know was that her downfall was already in motion, and when it came, it would be swift and brutal. The day of the hearing arrived gray and cold, as if the weather itself sensed the storm about to unfold. I hadn't slept much the night before. Between preparing evidence, organizing witness statements, and calming Emily's fears, my body felt drained, but my mind was burning with determination. Karen, of course, arrived fashionably late. She strutted into the courthouse in designer heels, oversized sunglasses hiding half her face, and an air of smug superiority radiating off her. To her, this wasn't about truth or justice. It was about winning, about crushing anyone who dared to challenge her carefully constructed facade. She had even brought a folder stuffed with what I assumed were fabricated evidences, printouts of angry Facebook comments, screenshots twisted out of context, even a few photos where she had clearly staged herself looking upset. To anyone else, it might have seemed convincing, but I had the one thing Karen didn't: the truth. When the judge called us to present our sides, Karen wasted no time launching into her performance. She clutched her tissues dramatically, claiming she had been living in fear ever since the accident. She painted me as an obsessive neighbor on a crusade, accusing me of spreading edited videos, stalking her, and rallying the community against her. Her voice cracked at just the right moments. She dabbed at her eyes with the tissue, glancing back at the spectators for effect. If I hadn't known her for years, even I might have believed her. But then it was my turn. I didn't match her theatrics. I didn't need to. I simply laid out the evidence, piece by piece. The video of the accident, clear and undeniable. The threatening notes, one tucked under my windshield wiper, another slipped into my mailbox. The dash cam footage of her tailing me late at night. The photos emailed from a burner account, showing my home from disturbing angles. And finally, testimony from several neighbors who had witnessed both the accident and her unhinged behavior afterward. The courtroom grew tense as each piece was presented. Karen shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her confidence faltering. Her attorney tried to object, but the judge allowed the evidence, noting its relevance and consistency. The breaking point came when Mr. Harris, the neighbor with the security footage, took the stand. His video showed everything. The moment Emily was struck, Karen's SUV veering toward the sidewalk, and Karen herself stepping out of the car with no concern for the child she had injured. The gasps in the courtroom were audible. Karen's mask slipped then. Her face flushed red, her jaw tightened, and she muttered under her breath as the judge replayed the video twice for clarity. By the time it was over, the narrative had shifted entirely. No longer was Karen the victim. She was exposed for what she truly was: reckless, manipulative, and dangerous. The judge's ruling was swift. Her restraining order request was denied. Instead, the court issued an order of protection for me and Emily. Karen was prohibited from coming within 100 yards of our home, and a criminal investigation into her harassment and threats was officially opened. It was a victory, yes, but not the end, because Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully. The moment we stepped outside the courthouse, she exploded. Cameras from local news outlets, alerted by the viral live stream from the park incident, were waiting on the steps. And Karen, rather than hiding her face, launched into another tirade. She shouted about corruption, about conspiracies, about how the entire neighborhood was out to destroy her. Her words, once manipulative and sharp, now sounded unhinged. Reporters caught every second of it on tape. By that evening, the footage had spread online, painting her not as a victim, but as a reckless neighbor whose behavior had gone too far. For the first time in years, Karen wasn't in control of the narrative. That night, I sat by Emily's bedside, watching her sleep peacefully for the first time in weeks. Relief washed over me, but I knew better than to think it was over. People like Karen didn't just stop, they spiraled. And I could already sense that the final act of her chaos was drawing near. And when it came, it would put everything, our safety, our home, and our future, on the line.